Yes, so our speaker today is Dr. Liliane Myoren Papin. She's a regular at the temple. She's a Franco-American writer and teacher of Chinese medicine, which she describes as an ecological medicine particularly suited to our times. And she
Mm.
practices and teaches acupuncture, herbology, qigong, and dietary therapy. She's written several books which have French titles that I will not butcher, but the English translation is The Treasures of Chinese Medicine for Today's World from 2015, and The Great Book of Daoist Medicine, the Immunity Special Edition from 2021.
Mm.
Um, she also makes the menu and cooks with her husband for our sashins. So if you are involved in the October sashin, you will get to appreciate her menu. Welcome, Liliane.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Actually, thank you to you, Quinn, and thank you also to Mema. It's funny because Tejo cannot be with us today, at least not in direct. She said she would watch the replay, and I was thinking that it's a little bit like having the kids without Mama today, and seeing her. You're doing very well, so she'll be happy, I think. So it's great. It's great. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to share, that's my usual style, a little PowerPoint when I can have that. So I'm going to share the screen, and please just let me know, maybe Quinn or Mehmet, let me know if you can see it and if everything is okay. All right, so, and thank you for thinking of making me co-animator so that I could share. So thank you. Here we go.
Mm.
All right, and I'm going to put slideshow. Start. All right, so is everything okay? Yes?
Looks great.
Thank you. So my teachings, or my learning, I should say, even more so than teaching, is mostly based on Taoism, which is the basis also for Chinese medicine. And a lot of the teachings we find in Buddhism, and, it's the same substrate. And of course, there's a Chinese flavor to Taoism, and it's very much linked to Chinese medicine. However, we find the same relationship with Ayurveda and the Vedas of India. Anyway, so the title for this season is Tending to the Fall. And this morning I was actually thinking that Tending to the Fall would be a great title for a book, because I think it's one of the most difficult challenges of our human life. And Taoism is very pragmatic. And sometimes we think we understand it, but then life has a way of teaching it deeper and deeper and deeper. So meaning basically there can be no high without any down. There can be no down without any high. We cannot go up without coming down. And of course, as human beings, we tend to enjoy being high, which is, again, the substrate for many addictions. We like to be high. We don't like to be down. And we think that down is not quite normal. And, again, addiction is a way of trying to come back to the high. And so we have a harder time with the fall than with the climbing up. And of course, this season is very much about the fall, which, the word in English has the advantage of being very clear, the fall, right? We don't have that in French. We have the word automne, which, autumn, you have that too. And experts, linguists don't all agree on the origin of it. It might mean also the fall in its Latin root, but it's not as clear. So again, in English, yes, the fall. Here we are. And so how are we going to deal with that? And as usual, and Taoism does encourage us to think it that way, each season has very deep meanings at all levels of life. Seasons are not any different from us. You know, we have the high of summer, the fire of summer, and we have the fall coming afterwards. So that's the introduction. So let's see next. So in terms of the 5 transformations, and actually that's really the translation of the Chinese word wuxing. It's not the 5 elements. Elements is not the correct translation. It's really the 5 transformations. And you will find 2 models of that, what I call it the wheel of, the Daoist wheel of medicine, and you have 2 models, the first one being usually more commonly seen, the second one, but they're interesting, both of them. So you could say that the first one, which has, you see, 5 energies and 1 extra season, which is basically now, Indian summer, the end of fire energy, roughly from beginning mid-August to the equinox or early October. So I call that a cosmic model of the 5 transformations, because Earth itself doesn't escape that the 5 energies, meaning you have the cosmic fire, we could call it the Big Bang or whatever you want. We have cosmic fire, and then you have the condensation with the cold that creates the planets. And all the planets have the same characteristics of Earth, of being round, of having a gravitation field. And so that's a cosmic model that relates to all of the universe of those 5 transformations. Then the second model, I call that the Earth model, meaning we are Earthlings. We don't live on Venus. We don't live on the moon. We live on the Earth. So all of us, animals, plants, trees, minerals, we are all subjected to the rules that reign on Earth. And Earth is at the center, meaning that the other 4 energies, the other 4 transformations happen on Earth. You make a fire on Earth, metal, the minerals, they're within Earth, water is held by Earth. So that's an Earth model. And of course, that's Earthlings is what we are. So the Earth is at the center. And in that model, it is said that between each season, you could imagine, I did not find, a good design for that, and maybe I should create one, but it shows that after each season, we come back like a spiral, come back to the Earth. A bit like when you have high tide and low tide, there's that moment where the water is kind of stable or kind of checking itself and starting the next movement. Well, it's the same. Between each season, there's roughly 10 days to 3 weeks that are considered Earth energy, coming back to the center and looking for equilibrium. So, so here is Earth energy. All right. So again, Earth energy, all the planets are subjected to it. What does it mean, Earth energy? The fundamental words for it are transformation. And I'm going to insist on transformation. Transportation, in a way, is just derives from transformation, like a river, transforms all the time, transports, and it's never the same water. In terms of organs, its earth energy is associated to the stomach, the spleen, and pancreas. So Indian summer, early fall, the taste associated with that season is sweet. So you can see that's a challenge, all right, sweet, right? The sense, the sensory organ in the mouth and the sense is taste. So, and we have a lunar and solar calendar. So you could, in terms of the lunar calendar this year, this season, the fall started August 7th. And in the solar calendar, it starts on September 21st. So the way I understand it is that the lunar calendar looks more at what is invisible, in preparation, underneath, unconscious, when the solar calendar is when the energy is in full bloom, right? So 21st of September, of course, depending on where we live, but definitely falling of leaves is really well underway. So, but if we pay attention, like here we are in South Carolina, and we really noticed a shift at the beginning of August and mid-August in the temperature of the mornings, the whole energy changed. So whether we look at the cosmic model or the Earth model, we are really in the season of Earth transformation, Earth energy. So you see that some of its characteristics are circle, roundness, fullness, and emptiness, like the stomach, or like the tide. So meaning there's that sense of cycling and recycling. That's what Earth does, right? For millennia, we have buried our dead and they get transformed. Everything gets transformed. So recycling is Earth energy. Tides have that rhythm. So it's that basic roundness of cycle. So within the understanding of Earth energy, you find the concepts of stability, regularity being important. It's the circle, the circle of season, the circle of days, and integration, transformation and integration. So just keep that in mind for now, because I'm just going to, to glean some ideas, but it's really profound because we have lots of teachings for our everyday life. We are not separate from the seasons. And of course, adapting to the season is part of how we integrate with Earth energy on planet Earth. And of course, this is becoming more difficult today because our modern civilization, by and large, is not following that basic rhythm. So, of course, the first relationship to Earth energy is food. And take food in the large sense, is the food we eat, is the water we drink, everything that we integrate, that we take from outside and becomes us. That's Earth energy. Breathing and sleep belong more to heaven's energy. So again, they're always together. And we see that roundness in the vegetables, for example, that come right now. Squash, pumpkin are beginning to pop up. You see that they're more firm, more solid, more resistant than summer fruit, for example, the grapes, the apples, the pear. So there's that roundness and that inner sweetness that we find. And of course, in women's bodies in particular, that roundness of earth is very apparent. It is there in men just the same way, stomach energy, right? In pregnancy, in the breast. And of course, if you have that kind of roundness when you're not pregnant, then that means also your earth energy is disturbed, you know? So the big belly shows a disturbance with earth energy and with food, the relationship to food. So you could say basically already that any struggle we have with food indicates our relationship to earth, because, and that's literal, that's earth energy. So earth in our body means our flesh, you know. So obesity, for example, or being too thin, according to Chinese medicine, are disorders of earth energy. Okay. And I want to talk about transformation a little bit and talk about impermanence. There was a very good passage in Pema Chodron's book, you know, on the way we live is the way we die. And or maybe it's in Falling Apart. I don't know which one of the two. I don't remember which one of the two. But anyway, what she pointed out is that impermanence has a bad rep. You know, we don't like, basically, again, we don't like the down and we don't like the end, usually, except if we suffer, we like the end of suffering. But impermanence, you know, if we're not together here, but I'm sure if I was asking you impermanence, because I have done it in class, you know, the first thing is, well, things don't last, death, you know, da da da. But really, it's part of the alchemy of transformation. So you can say transformation, transportation are actually other words for impermanence. That's a good rep of impermanence, so to speak. Meaning, in order for it to be changed, we need impermanence, right? So growth, development, education, right? Which is learning and changing, adaptation, wisdom. Those are all synonyms of impermanence. And sometimes when we talk about impermanence, we don't think about that aspect. And interestingly, I could not help but write the famous line from a chemist, a French chemist who lived in the 19th century. He was not a Buddhist, certainly, nor a Daoist, but he said in chemistry, and he was the one who created the first table of elements. He said, nothing gets lost, everything transforms. And that's true of particles, that's true of every single thing in human beings, in animals, in trees, in plants. You know, that's constant recycling that we see in the rhythm of life. And so making friend with that, accepting that is part of our human journey. And just like everybody else, I suppose everybody else, I have a hard time with it too, you know? And obviously I'm not the only one. If you just, you know, watch the news, or everybody struggles with that. And addiction, again, is one of the things that come from not wanting to let things go and not wanting that transformation. So again, this is from Pema Chodron. There's something that is really very interesting that comes from her teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche. She talks about kleshas. And klesha, what that means, the word klesha, means propensity that we have in our personality. And there are 5 major kleshas. And so each klesha has a positive and a negative aspect, right? So you could say, I'm just going to talk about the one that corresponds to what we're talking about, which is the klesha of craving and desire, which is, there's the positive aspect, like the desire to grow, the desire to learn, the desire to make people comfortable, all of that. Desire is not bad, as sometimes it is shown. It gets bad when it turns into a craving, not being able to let go. However, what Pema Chodron shows is that in that tradition, the klesha, as in itself, whether it's in quote unquote its negative aspect or positive aspect, it has both. So let's look at desire, craving, you could say greed. And of course, the first greed is food greed, eating too much and eating too fast, or not eating enough, or whatever, right? And corresponds to the Tibetan image of the hungry ghost, never having enough, right? Never satisfied. And that's the root of addiction, because the definition of addictions is, by definition, it can never be satisfied. Nothing can be the last. We need to go back to it, whether it's the next day, the next morning, the next month, but there's this constant seeking. However, says Pema Chodron, in that tradition that she inherited from her teacher, when within that klesha, and we all have to deal with them because we all have the challenge of living on earth. And so according to our personality, some kleshas are more dominant. There's a klesha of aggression, there's a klesha of pride. There are 5, okay? But we all have them. And within that, there's a positive aspect of what she calls discriminating wisdom. Meaning, of course, when we deal with that klesha of craving, slowly we learn about discriminating what is good for us and what is not good for us. So that positive aspect is within the klesha of craving. So, and of course, our work or our study, our destiny as human beings, to experiment that and transform the material, recycle it into discriminating wisdom, and hopefully be able to transform it again and again and again, right? So the klesha in the negative aspect is the again and again and again and again and again and again, making the same mistake. We all know the klesha of alcoholism, swearing not to have another drink in the morning and having one in the evening. So there's that repetition of addiction. And it's not only substances, food and drinks are obvious, but power, moods, for example, being addicted to certain moods, that's also a klesha. So it takes some inner wisdom to be able to see them and understand them. So again, food is our basic earth energy. It's our first relationship to earth energy. And if you notice in this season, which is definitely the season of the spleen, pancreas, and stomach, there's a natural sweetness, pears, I put here jujube, you know, that's a kind of date that we use as a remedy in Chinese medicine. So the seasonal food has that natural sweetness. And so if we turn to seasonal food, we are going to find that natural sweetness. What that means also is a good time. Like I said, it's a bit like the tide, you know, the in between two seasons. We're going toward the fall. So it's a good time to take stock. Where are we? What do we know about ourselves when comes the fall? Do we get sick? Do we tend to get the flu? Do we tend to get down, to get depressed? So it's a good time to evaluate and a good time to prepare. That's part of the transformation. So in the book I wrote on immunity, for example, I made a list that I call emergency kitchen and emergency home pharmacy, meaning it's a good time to go to your kitchen, go to your home pharmacy and see what you need to refill. Like it's a good time to change the spices, for example, because spices, and when I say spices, I mean in particular thyme, which is good for the lung. You know, all the things that we might need when we get sick, when we are too tired to go outside. And that's, of course, the time when if we have nothing, we're going to turn to whatever is at hand in terms of medication, go to the closest pharmacy and buy an over-the-counter medication. So it's a good time to take stock and to prepare. And I was thinking here, I see squirrels, for example, and right now they're beginning to prepare. It's interesting to see what they do. Another important thing to do in this season, I mean always, but is particularly now because it's stomach and pancreas season, is to masticate our food, to chew our food, because saliva has natural antibodies, it's alkaline, so it can help. Usually during the summer, we become more acidic, you know, and our rhythm of life is usually more disordered, let's say, because the days are long, it's exciting. So it's a good time to come back to center. And when we eat, you know, a bit like when we do at the session, you know, the slow eating, conscious eating, in order to come back to our earth energy, come back to our stomach, notice the natural sweetness. You can say sugar is very acidic, and you can say if we crave sugar so much, is because we lack sweetness in our life, in our food, and the natural sweetness. When we eat very fast, our food becomes acidic. The stomach acids are not ready, so we don't digest well, right? So it's important also, if there's one thing we can put in place, is a regular schedule. Again, summer is not really a time for regular schedules for most of us, for children, you know. So because there's excitement and there's sunshine, you want to be out, and it's hot, so you don't sleep as well. So for all those reasons, however, this time, this in-between time between tides, is important to come back to center so we can avoid the peaks of hypoglycemia and insulin fluctuations, to avoid cravings on a physical level. I know there's a saying with A, where 3 things that they say is never too hungry, never too thirsty, never too tired, because they know those are the things that contribute to addiction. So that regular schedule, my teacher, Michio Kushi, for example, who used to counsel, lots of people suffering from cancer, that was the first thing he would recommend to them, a regular schedule for sleep, for eating, in order to avoid those peaks of hypoglycemia and insulin fluctuations and help the body heal with that regularity and prepare our stomach to the acids in the stomach. There's a whole process that happens with regularity. So it's a good time to put that back into our schedule. So what is very interesting in our civilization craving for sweetness, and of course is sugar. So this comes from the New York Times, I think, those illustrations. Here is our consumption of sugar, how it has gone up and up and up and up and up. Very interestingly, insulin, the hormone in our body, it's the one hormone that sends the signal enough. So, okay, I have eaten enough. I don't want any more. And that's also gives us a signal, okay, it's time to eat. And that's pancreas energy. And we find that concept of enough, of course, in our word satisfaction. Satis in Latin means enough. And as you can see with this other graphic here, our consumption of sugar is just up the roof. And, it's the first disease, diabetes is the first disease that is put on a par level with epidemics because it's developing as fast. And it's not sparing any country, including the poor countries, because that's what we deliver to those countries, cookies and cheap milk and thing. And if you look, in the food we buy, there's unless you're very careful, there will be hidden sugar in it. So there's that huge craving for sweetness, which you can conjugate as you wish. What does it mean on a symbolic level that we are so desperate for sweetness? Where are we lost in our earth energy, in our relationship to earth energy? Not surprisingly, the population that seem to suffer, not the only ones, but suffer from diabetes the most, are people who have been displaced from their land, from their connection to earth. Interestingly also is 99.9% of the carbon is found in the Earth's crust. So what is interesting, we say carbohydrates. So basically the role of minerals, the role of plants is to digest and transmute the carbon of Earth into sweetness to give it to all human beings and to all animals. I find that every time I think about that, and I know I can go deeper and deeper with that, but this is the amazing transformation. We cannot digest minerals, right? Plants do that for us. And so if we pay attention, if we chew in everything we eat, including in bitterness, there is an inner sweetness that the earth has transformed for us so that animals and human beings can enjoy that inner sweetness. So again, what does it mean that we are so disconnected with that inner sweetness? Now, what are the signs of a diseased earth energy, stomach, pancreas? The first word, according to Chinese medicine, is heaviness. And actually, if a patient tells us he or she feels heavy, we're happy. It's like, okay, here is a diagnosis. Stomach, spleen is out of order. Think of when we have a cold, you know, how our thinking becomes cloudy, muddy, and distorted. You know, we see the world through lens that are distorting, you know, and there's that feeling of heaviness and difficulty, you know, of weight on our shoulders and in sugar. So the pathogen that corresponds to that, according to Chinese medicine, is dampness. Dampness translated, it means mucus, too much, you know, watery stuff, edema, fluid retention, fungus, fermentation. All of those are aspects of diseased earth energy that is not transforming right. A sense of dullness too. We're not, you know, when we have that cloudy thinking, we're not sharp. Thinking is slow. There's a sense of fatigue, lack of motivation. And one of aspect also of dampness, it stagnates. It's, you know, it doesn't move easily. Think of Debbie, you know, the latest hurricane there was. The big problem was not so much the strength of the hurricane, but the fact that it stagnated and made, you know, flooded and stagnated over the landscape so that it all became over flooded. So those are also aspects of disturbed earth energy. How do we transform dampness? On a physical level, there are a few things. Of course, it's big topics, so I'm just giving you a few pointers according to Chinese medicine. Number one is aromatic foods and herbs, you know, like ginger, thyme, cinnamon, gentle spices that are going to help digestion. Digestion is another word for transformation. Movement, you can guess, to help stagnation. Whatever movement, walking, dancing. Kanji is a word, the Chinese word for porridge, which is a very slow cooking, long time. So it's good in the morning, and you can include some herbs that will help dampness. So it's a good time to start, you know, including ginger, thyme. And there are many, but those are some of the most common ones. Also, natural sweetness. So squash is great, you know, cooking rice with squash, cooking rice with nuts, cooking rice with almonds, for example, long time, slow cooking. All of those will support the spleen, stomach, earth energy. Chewing, of course, and avoiding mucus-forming foods like sugar, dairy, yeast, you know, minimize as much as possible. And of course, that means being independent enough so that we don't follow the fashion foods that appear regularly. You know, like we can say that certainly yogurts have become so popular. We've never eaten as much yogurt as we do today. And of course, there's sugar in 99% of those yogurts. So avoiding what creates mucus. And if we observe our body, you know, after eating, we can tell, you know, the heaviness that we feel in our stomach. If our nose gets, you know, a bit nasal passages a bit blocked, you know, if we sneeze, if we need to blow our nose, there are many symptoms, many signs of what's happening when we eat certain foods, okay? And each one of us is different. So some people, they, gluten will create mucus for them. And white bread, for example, will create mucus. So again, coming back to the center means slow cooking and slow movement. Let's see, let's observe what is happening with us when we eat, before we eat, and of course, some nice breathing before eating or some walking after eating. All of those are little things that are very important in the process of transformation. So, what does it mean, this word transformation, the fall from the summer, emotionally and spiritually? Interestingly enough, in French, we have an expression like you have in English with to have the blues, to have the blues. Well, in French, we say to have the spleen, okay? And the poets who made that word famous in the 19th century had no idea of the meaning of spleen in Chinese medicine. But that heaviness, what they describe is exactly that, the heaviness, the kind of dissatisfaction, the post-summer blues, going back to work, going back to and again, some of us might be happy about coming back to a routine, but let's say that generally speaking, there's that heaviness, oh my God, back to the grind, okay? And this is where we find the center of craving and addiction, because whatever we don't like is what we try to escape in any way we can. And sugar, which is called a comfort food, is one of them, but by any means, it's not the only one. So substances, again, they're easy to see. There are more subtle addictions. Again, mood would be one. Anger can be an addiction, to control environment. Power can be an addiction. Sex can be an addiction. So there's many, many flavors of addiction. And again, in the klesha, we don't need to necessarily feel bad about it. It's just what we experience as human beings, and we all have to go through it one way or the other. So letting go, the hearing the signal enough, which we have such a hard time doing, right? Letting go is part of it. There is also the title of a book that I really liked and still like, by Jack Cornfield. The title of his book is After the Ecstasy, the Laundry, right? And again, as human beings, we all have to go through that, and that's part of life on earth. That's part of transformation of life. So whether we high on whatever, there will be the fall. And the fall does not need to be bad. And I think that in the Zen tradition, for example, what we hear about, asking to clean the toilet as part of training, because we make the difference between what is high and what is low. But the truth is, the toilet and the place where we go to defecate and urinate is very important. And we know how miserable we are when we get constipated or when we have diarrhea. So all this kind of hierarchy that we consciously or unconsciously create is really an illusion, because all of life has this rhythm of up and down and down and up and up and down. And Zen saying that's very famous is, what do you do before enlightenment? cut wood and fetch water. And after enlightenment, cut wood and fetch water. And I think I told Tejo that I really enjoyed in her Dharma talk a couple of weeks ago. She talked about boring. And that's a judgment that we tend to make about things that are not the high, that it's boring. But in Taoism, it is actually, there's a saying, a Chinese saying, that boredom is a privilege. And of course, you can think, well, if you're bored, it means you don't have to work too much, and so you have time. But I think it goes much deeper than that. It's the same as after the ecstasy, the laundry, cut wood and fetch water. I think it's the same teaching, meaning that we make judgments, but really the sacredness of life is in every detail, every single detail. And so, Thich Nhat Hanh teaching about mindfulness, that's the same teaching. Every breath is important. And of course, that's a training that we all need to do, to create, and meditation, yoga, qigong, all the things that we do are to teach us that sacredness of movement, that sacredness of the body, of everything in the body, and sacredness of food. And that's unfortunate that in our civilization today, we are mostly cut off from the sacredness of food, and realizing that, we think all food affects my stomach and accept my body. But the truth is, food has an emotional component and will affect our emotions. And again, when we look at people, and I say people, all of us in some ways, but, when we drink too much, we do change, right? And somehow we think that it's not the same with food, and it is. You give sugar to a child, within half an hour, 1 hour, the child is going to have some kind of hysterical outburst, bad mood, tears. So it affects us emotionally, the ups and downs. So Earth invites us to, let's say, minimize the ups and downs. And spiritually, it's the same, see the sacredness in everyday life. One illusion that I think we all have, I certainly came to meditation with that illusion, is, my life was going to be perfect if I meditated right. Or same actually with food, that if I ate right, everything would be all right. And those are components, but no, my life has not become perfect. And meditation, I have to live with boredom, just like, Tejo was talking about. And that's something we have such a hard time, and yet I think that's, from Taoism, this is where the center of wisdom. So actually, in terms of positive klesha, of craving, it is wisdom. Wisdom is nothing but the transformation of challenges into a lesson, into a guiding principle. So in those moments, and in this season, is a good time to come back to Earth, because that's what spleen and Earth energy is inviting us to do, to come back to Earth, to balance, to pay attention to the transformation of food, of our emotions. It means also preparing, coming back to center, knowing oneself. What do I need to prepare for in this season? I know myself. So what tends to happen in my emotions in the winter, in the fall? How can I prepare for that? The basic quality that corresponds to Earth energy is equanimity, and understanding everyday life is sacred, whether high or low, whether it's a lesson, whether it's a disease, an accident. We all die in the end, right? We all die. So there will be, we can look at that as the low that's going to happen anyway. And within that moment of birth and death and rebirth and redeath, you know, that constant cycle of life is our space of learning. And every moment, every emotion, including the ones that we think are bad. And that's what I liked so much about Pema Chodron in her book and the clashes, is that, you know, high and low, they're always together. You cannot have high without low. You cannot have night without day. You cannot appreciate sunshine if you don't have cloudy days. You know, people who are in the heat all the time, they dream of snow. They want to go. I remember reading a novel once, a detective novel written by a Norwegian author. And no, actually, it was the other way around. It was by somebody who lived in Venice and, you know, was saying how he and his family had prepared a vacation to go to Norway and how they dreamt about snow. So basically, high or low, they always come together. And September, let's not forget, is the time of equinox, equanimity, coming back to center and making peace with the fall, with the fact that life always has up and down, high and low, and troubles come when we get stuck, or when we want to get stuck in the high, or when we get stuck in the low. So voila, those are my 2 cents for this season based on Taoism. And well, we have 5 minutes. So if there's any question, I'll be happy to hear them and possibly answer.
Hi, thank you so much for
You're
your
very
I loved how you used Chinese medicine today. I'm actually studying Chinese medicine at Daoist traditions. So a lot of
great.
resonated. And I'm wondering, just a practical question, where can I find, is there a website that you have or a way to contact you after this?
Oh, sure. I mean, I have, you know, an email. I have a phone, and of course, I do love to see people studying Chinese medicine. Actually, I used to teach at some point. I did teach at Daoist traditions
Oh,
a
okay.
long time ago, but I did. And so, yeah, you can maybe send me an email if it's something that needs more. So maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the chat. I also have a website.
Okay.
It's eastwestholisticmedicine.com.
Okay.
And I teach it in France, and mostly to lay people, meaning not necessarily people who want to become therapists, but I find there's such a richness for us, you know, in what not necessarily as therapists, but in our everyday life. I call that an ecological medicine, you know, an eco medicine, and so many teachings. So
Thank you.
you're very welcome. Are you in first year, second year?
First year.
First year.
We're going to
Yeah.
week 5, so yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, have a great journey with Chinese
Thank
medicine.
you. And I will contact you.
Okay.
I just wanted to thank you for today. I've been caught in this cycle and just haven't been able to kind of grasp what was going and happening. And so your teaching today gave me direction and more understanding of what's happening. And I appreciate having this info to kind of look at this in a different way, and possibly finding a better path than what I've been doing. Let's just say that. So
Okay.
I too will be seeking out more information on this topic because I really feel like it resonated with me and where I'm at.
Okay.
So,
Right.
thank you. It was very timely. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
And one question from me, could you elaborate on the earth and the body shape? You had said obesity or emaciation, being too thin, is a sign of being out of alignment with earth energy, but the earth is round. So what would be the appropriate body shape?
Well, we are round, whether, if you look, for example, if I take, if I cut my arm, there's roundness, round, we don't need to create it. It's already there. Your face is round. Your head is round. Our buttocks are round, in women, breasts are round. And, again, it's our inner shape. If we cut our trunk, it's round. So roundness is there, So basically what you're saying or what you're wondering about, we say it with our language. We know when it's too round, right? It's too much, like when the belly falls and is round and not because of pregnancy, we know it's out of order. If we are too quote unquote bony, that it lacks that. So of course there's a cultural, it's a difficult question because there's a cultural layer to that. Like in our culture today, because of fashion and because of models, we tend to put emphasis on, bony or, being the standard. In North Africa, they like round women, what we would consider to round. So there's definitely a bit of, it's not exact science, but let's say being comfortable in body so that our body shape doesn't interfere with our breathing, our energy, whether we're too speedy, whether, that roundness is a concept that has to do with emotional stability as well. So again, there's a question of personal taste. Some people like a bit more round, some people like a little bit more thin, but let's say average. And basically it's flesh that's earth energy, because our flesh comes from our food. So that's how it relates to earth energy, right? So too much flesh, not enough flesh is earth energy. And is that enough?
That's wonderful. Thank you for that clarification and that expansion on that. And just in general, thank you for this talk. It was wonderful to see the relations I had never seen before. So thank you very, very much.
Very welcome. Thank you for your question.